Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A huge video for you today with action expected out from the Fed. In addition to that, big news from IREn we're going to be covering in detail, along with a second look into Mara. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below how you're feeling about the macro landscape right now and more specifically the Bitcoin mining sector. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, guys, that's right. Tuesday, December 2nd. This is a big day for the macro environment along with the Bitcoin mining sector. We're going to be breaking down both of those themes in today's presentation. Before we do, Anthony, you're back on the travel trail over in Eastern Asia there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in Bangkok for a couple of days. I then fly to Hong Kong tomorrow. I'll be in Hoi Hin from the weekend for the best part of a week, and then I finish my trip with a week in Dubai, stroke Abu Dhabi, looking at potential locations to relocate to. So, if anyone's in the areas over the next couple of weeks, drop me a note in the chat and. Or in the comments, and I'll try and get back to you. I've had a couple of people reach out to me here in Bangkok, so that's been good. And I have met quite a few people in Dubai last week, so happy to meet up with anyone that wants to, if it's within easy distance. And as I say, looking forward to it.
Excellent. And I'm still here in Calgary, snowy Calgary in the basement. If anyone would like to meet up in Calgary, always happy to do so. Now, Anthony, you may have to start upgrading some of these flight tickets because Bitcoin itself having a very strong session. We took the slide when it had just crossed into the 90s. It's now up over 92,000. So a very strong session for the number one cryptocurrency in the world. We're going to talk about some of those macro factors, specifically the Fed in a second here. But you can see we're virtually out of that little dip or ditch that we went through over the weekend.
Yeah, certainly a nice rise today. And like you say, I think you only put these slides together, about 20 minutes ago. So in the space of that period of time now, it's gone from 90,700 to over, you're saying now 92,000. We can't just sit here waiting for it to stop. We'll just pick a moment in time. But this is what happens in the Bitcoin world. I mean, you've got to take some time to zoom out a little bit. If you're going to start looking at the price every day, that's not going to do you any good because it is volatile. If you go back to the start of 2024, the Bitcoin price was 42,000. Look at where we are today. It's in the 90,000. There's not many assets in a couple of years that can show you a more than 100% gain. And at one point, it was 200% gain of that period when we reached the all-time high. So you've got to zoom out a little bit. Take every day. Don't spend every hour watching the price because it's going to upset you on most days. But if you zoom out and just you've got your investment there. I've been buying Bitcoin for the last 6 years and just buy a little bit every month. And this is a long-term thing. This might be a 10, 15-year thing, and then we'll see how it goes from there. But I'm not looking at it from a daily basis.
No, we're certainly not. However, we do have to give you an update on a daily basis on the channel. So you can listen here, but don't be checking it anywhere else. The Bitcoin miners, this will be a welcome surprise when you guys are watching the video as well. They were actually started off okay, pulled back a little bit. You'll see at the snapshot here towards the lower end of their daily range. However, now, obviously, in light of Bitcoin picking up movement there, the miners are starting to recover. We wanted to talk about a few of the notable themes, though. You can actually see Hive and Mara up at the top. We're going to be focused on Mara's business model throughout today's presentation. On the other side of the coin, you can see Hut 8 and ABTC obviously having a difficult day, which we'll address as well. With that being said, any other standouts on the list, Anthony?
Yeah, IREn's was down in early trading, down 6%, and we'll cover IREn today on the podcast and give you an update as some of the potential reasons for that share price. Remember, only $5 back in April, $5.13, and it's already reached well over $76. I think it was heading towards intraday and maybe $80 intraday, literally just over a month ago. So that's had a fantastic run there. But we'll cover IREn a bit more with their two updates that we received today. But as I say, it looks like on this chart here, it might have changed by the time you guys are listening into the podcast. But at the start of the day, it was pretty much a green across all the shares, and then as soon as the sort of like within about 10 minutes of market opening, things started to change and got a little bit worse there. But great to see, Hive and Mara. BitZero, Bryce, they're having a good day as well today, and they were sort of top performing share yesterday.
Yeah, they were, and we're looking forward to hosting the CEO along with Kevin O'Leary, a strategic investor, this Thursday on the program. So that's going to be a great one to watch. Make sure you guys set your reminders for that. You just mentioned ABTC. I want to pick up on that story, but before we do, let's take a look at the heat map here. Actually, the largest market cap company, IREn, you can see first three columns in the red, followed by two strong greens. This one, again, talk about volatility, talk about zooming out. We've seen this virtually all red, virtually all green, just within the last 30 days.
Yeah, and if you look at the month change there, you can see quite clearly that there's probably an average of about 30% down across the board in terms of all these machines, and that's probably taking into account Bitcoin was at 126,000 just over a month ago, and today, even doing quite well today in that sort of that 92,000 range, that's still the best part of 34,000 down. So Bitcoin down probably 25% from its highs. You can see the mining stocks here 25 to 30% down as well. So a bit of correlation there. You can see the green again, that stands out. It's pretty much those miners that have pivoted towards the HPC, either by signing contracts or very clear indication that they're now converting sites into data centers in readiness to sign some deals. So you can see that there, and then you can see a few of the stocks showing red from the year to date and the 1 year change. I expect with all these stocks on here, because of the fact that all of them now are looking for to deliver HPC in the future. You think about the power availability out there and the power required to meet the demand for HPC. I think most of these are going to be winners in the long term because they've got the power now, they've got the sites now, and this power isn't about being developed. This is power that's available. And so it's not pipeline, it's available power for a lot of these companies now who can convert what they're doing in mining towards HPC. Remember, it's going to take 18 months to 2 years to build out the data centers so they can continue mining, getting some cash flow in there until the data center's completed, and then a case of deciding, are we going to move mining machines, or are we going to stop mining and focus really on this, what we call more predictable contracted revenue and better margins currently when you compare to the margins they're achieving with Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, we talked about that in yesterday's podcast as well, in this aggressive pivot. One of the companies we focused on was actually Hut 8 and their infrastructure growth, their power pipeline, and that's really where we wanted to start on the miner-specific news today. Now, what we know is ABTC obviously having a difficult day in markets, down anywhere in the 40-42% range. It was actually halted this morning. However, we did recently host both Matt Prusek, the president of ABTC, and Asher Janut, the CEO of Hut 8. Both very strong interviews, articulated the vision extremely well. We don't know why the share price is down today, Anthony, but they did talk to us about some potential lockup periods expiring.
Yeah, I think Matt indicated that they were coming close to one of these lockup periods. And this is basically where you have the founders who invest their money, this like non-public money, into the company, and then they get issued an allocation of shares, but they can't sell the shares to a certain date. And we're just sort of at the moment, we're just it's purely speculative, but we're just guessing maybe that could be a reason for that severe drop there, because that's a significant amount to drop in a day without anything coming out from a newsworthy source. So maybe the company will be announcing something along those lines there. We've tried to source it ourselves, but 40% is a big number. We've said that the volatility of this space, can be significant. We have seen, in all honesty, a lot of reductions in terms of some of the DATs over the last sort of month or two, which has seen a massive reduction, likes of Strategy and many of these companies that have set up particularly just to, have Ethereum or Bitcoin on the balance sheet and to grow that using a number of strategies to accumulate. And some of those share prices have really dropped there. Maybe ABTC's been caught into that there. But as soon as we hear something more concrete, we'll let you guys know.
Now, another notable theme we talked about in yesterday's coverage is the Trump affiliation of ABTC. Both Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr. involved in the company. Now, their father, Trump Sr., was also making headlines today in relation to the Fed. So that's going to be the macro topic. Before we mention that, another piece of housekeeping: Vanguard has now allowed their clients to start purchasing Bitcoin ETFs. Pretty successful opening day, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, within 30 minutes, it already hit $1 billion. So that's pretty impressive. When you think about these ETFs when they were originally approved, many of the ETFs were approved back in January 2024. This one has obviously just been released today, but that's a significant amount. Vanguard is obviously, it's a massive investment fund, so most people will have maybe part of their pensions, using the Vanguard there, because there's not many bigger than Vanguard out there. So that's impressive to see. And this is saying exactly what we've been saying on the podcast. We're trying to find these stories as to why the Bitcoin price has gone down, and you see the positivity day after day, and the Bitcoin price is still volatile. But as it says there, this is a wild day today for that. 1 billion in 30 minutes. Let's see what it's like at the end of the week.
No kidding. I always get a chuckle out of these, seeing all these big institutions finally cave to Bitcoin. Obviously, BlackRock came out of the gate extremely successful with their IBIT ETF, and now Vanguard finally coming around to Bitcoin as well. Now, in terms of Trump Sr., the president, he's been active in discussion with Jerome Powell throughout the year. Obviously, a difference of opinions on interest rates, how aggressively they should be pushing the economy. It looks like Jerome Powell's time is coming to an end. It also looks like Trump is leaning towards a new candidate, Kevin Hassett, which we'll talk about here, known for his Bitcoin, crypto, and even investments in the sector.
Yeah, apparently he's a bull. He owns, I think, $1 million worth of Coinbase stock, but according to Bloomberg, that could be even as high as 5 billion, and total assets of about 7.6 billion at least. And on top of that, he's actually earned about 50,000 from Coinbase for being on its academic and regulatory advisory council. So there's somebody that's really positive. And remember, most of the cabinet supporting Trump now are very bullish about Bitcoin. He seems to surround himself with people. And you've got to remember, there's 50 million Americans who have some sort of crypto or own, some sort of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency. That's more than a quarter of all the adults in the US. So it would make sense the cabinet to take note of what the population's doing in terms of this and supporting it. And you can quite rightly see that Trump's been very supportive ever since we saw him with his speech at the Nashville Bitcoin conference last year, which we were very fortunate to attend, Bryce.
We sure were. And you got to see Eric Trump speak just recently as well. But you can see the entire family now ingrained or integrated in this crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin mining ecosystem. Talked a lot about the fact that they were debanked and they had to look at crypto as an alternative. Now, obviously, very bullish on the topic. So that's the update on the macro situation. We also wanted to dust off Mara. This is a company that we were fortunate to go down and see their Granbury site. They've come under quite a bit of criticism recently on social media. The share price hasn't performed maybe as well as some of the other miners. They didn't maybe pivot to AI HPC as quickly. But when you look at what the company has actually done, their assets, the number of machines, some of these partnerships, investments, and the fact that they've got the second most Bitcoin of any company in the world. You talked about the fact that some of these DATs have been under pressure. It seems like it's kind of been a perfect storm for Mara, and it might be worth a second look.
Absolutely. They have well over 50,000 Bitcoin, and only strategy has more on the balance sheet. And apart from that, they are the largest Bitcoin miner. They've been the largest Bitcoin miner for the last 4 years, and they've just, constantly grown. There's been sort of like criticism of the fact that, for most of the time, they were buying machines and not buying facilities, and they had that asset light model. They will argue that when they did start to buy their sites, and I think they own about 70% of the sites now, that they were able to purchase those sites at a lower price than their peer miners have been buying. So maybe we'll see that sort of like that turnaround over a longer term period. They do have a number of sites that are still hosted, but in the next 2 years, the plan is to actually accumulate those sites as well when the contracts are complete, the hosting contracts are completed. So they want to obviously get 100% ownership. We'll monitor how that goes over the next couple of years. But as a Bitcoin miner, they're operating not just in the USA. They set up this joint venture in UAE. They've got another joint venture in Paraguay, and they also operate in Finland. And they're quite a responsible, social responsible mining company. They, in Finland themselves, I remember you talked about this in one of the presentations at Amsterdam Rice. I think it was they were providing electricity for 11,000 homes there.
They certainly are. Yeah, very innovative. Some of these communities have central heating for the entire village or community. Mara able to use the excess heat from the Bitcoin mining operation to essentially heat the homes of these local residents. So that's an excellent, I guess, community stewardship piece. We also talked to them extensively about their connection, their investment with the local community in Texas. They had invested in the robotics and engineering club at the local high school. The other key headline here that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with, the Auradine connection. So I'll let you get into a recent update from them, an aggressive new machine coming out to market, really rivaling the A3 from Seal Miner. But a lot of people don't understand there's a connection here. Trump has wanted to onshore the production. He's put in tariffs. Auradine has taken a lead role there. Mara followed suit.
Yeah, I picked up the Auradine story about 3 years ago, and in a conversation with the communications officer from Mara at the time, I said, "Can you tell us a bit more about this Auradine? You've made a significant investment." And he said at the time, "We can't say anything at the moment." It was in that 200 page of the report, and I found it on page 178 in a paragraph at the bottom there, and obviously now we do know what Auradine are. These are the Palo Alto guys who've been effectively building these ASICs, and they're unveiling, yesterday they unveiled the fact that they're coming out with a miner now that can compete with pretty much anything on the market. 9.8 joules a terahash. Now remember, IREn have the most efficient mining fleet at the moment at 15 joules a terahash. 9.8 would suggest that if that was installed in some of the Mara sites there, they could mine Bitcoin using only 2/3 of the power that IREn are using to mine. And we know the margins that IREn are making. In fact, they're one of the few miners that can make a reasonable margin, and probably actually making a full operating margin, taking into all the costs associated. So this is positive news for Mara because they've got a significant investment in Auradine. They're probably going to get first pick of a lot of these machines that come off the assembly line there when they're being produced. And this will be more and more going into some of the sites there because Mara have remained, they were one of the final pure play miners along with CleanSpark until both of them really at the 11th hour started to pivot. They saw what was happening in the space. They saw the other 30 public miners out there decided that the power heading towards HPC was going to give them a better return on investment than the Bitcoin mining was at the time. And that's not changed since then, even with the all-time high of Bitcoin literally 6 weeks ago. Looks like Mara and CleanSpark have now sort of like, pivoted across to follow that route as well. And we know that in terms of power in operation at the moment, we know that Mara have 1.2 gigawatts of power in operation at all their sites, with a further 600 megawatts potentially available to them.
Yeah, pretty impressive portfolio. So we've talked about the fact their Bitcoin mining operations super solid. They've been the leader in terms of exahash as long as we've been in the space. Now they've got these new machines coming out. They've also made a number of notable steps, to your point, in terms of this pivot or transition. So they actually purchased a wind farm in Texas, 139 megawatts. So similar to Soluna's approach, behind the meter renewable. But in Mara's case, with their balance sheet, they said, hey, we'll just buy the wind farm. This gives them a lot of optionality, super cheap electricity pricing if they want to run older, less efficient machines at that site, and the true vertical integration. But the other two developments we've seen, and I want to get your take on, highlighted in their most recent investor deck here, Exaon over in your neck of the woods, and then MPLX with some of the natural gas generation down in Texas as well.
Yeah, so Exxon is a subsidiary of EDF, and they're a French energy company. They operate in the United Kingdom. They're one of the larger energy companies over here, and they're growing as well. My son actually works for an energy company in the UK, and EDF have just purchased some of the customers from that company there. So they're growing in the UK as we speak there. So Exxon is a HPC and AI provider. And Mara now, with the purchase price and issue of shares, around about 170 million in total, have managed to purchase about 64% of the ownership of Exaon, and they have the opportunity to get a further 11% of that company in the future as well. So this is their sort of like their first move into this HPC. So commitments there. Then again, it's that proof of concept, delivering that there, and then when they've got these sites that have got up to 1.8 gigawatts of power, maybe they can start building out some data centers. And remember, I think before most miners, Mara actually, even though they weren't focused on acknowledging HPC, they were bringing in directors with HPC backgrounds on the board, and so they could probably see the future and weren't prepared to just come out there and announce it. But they do have a number of directors with experience in data centers and the building of data centers on the board itself. So it's going to be an interesting period for them as we see the space now with that shortage of compute power going forward. Will we see Mara and some of the others late to the tables really start focusing on trying to do that? But at the same time, you're quite right. With that wind farm, even though it's just over 120 megawatts of power, they have the choice there. They could put in, some of the older machines, but what they could also do is they could put some of the most efficient machines in there and mine more Bitcoin in terms of, you're not having to use as much power with these latest Auradine machines there. So maybe there's an option for to look at either strategy there, which will give the best return for the company.
Now, the other one we're excited about is this joint initiative with MPLX. So this is actually formed by Marathon Petroleum, not to be confused with Mara, the Bitcoin miner. They've come together through this collaboration to form MPLX. Now, this is going to be based on natural gas generation in Texas. In terms of the project overview, the numbers get pretty impressive. Up to 1.5 gigawatts of scalable generation, 400 megawatts in terms of the initial infrastructure deployment, with a 20 to 30 year lifespan in terms of the reserves there, and over 3 different offtake agreements. So this is interesting for Mara in the sense that they'll have access to very cheap power. They can also sell that power into the grid or to these 3 off-takers, and again, gives them a lot more versatility in controlling their own destiny moving forward.
It does, and it's sort of, even though when you ask Mara what its modus operandi is, I mean, they are still the largest Bitcoin miner with over 60 exahash in operation at the moment. They're basically saying, well, we're a company that's trying to get the best return from our power assets, and so when you look at the fact they've got this enormous hodl, which they're trying to utilize there to bring in a return on that. They've also got the mining, and they've also now focused on delivering some of that power towards high performance compute through 2 initiatives. The Exaon and this Mara Petroleum deal, MPLX. You can see they're sort of like covering a lot of bases at the moment there, and it'd be great to get Fred on the podcast soon, just to sort of like give us that overview of what the journey looks like over the next sort of 12 to 18 months.
One we're watching very closely now. The top story in terms of the miner sector today, out from IREn, they came out with two announcements last night concurrently, essentially intertwined here. The first talking about a convertible note proposal. So again, we'll get pricing on that likely tonight after hours. The other one talking about a proposed offering of ordinary shares. So we feel like this is very bullish for IREn. We'll talk to you exactly why that is, but maybe before we do, Anthony, can you explain what's gone on here in terms of the inner workings?
Yeah, so you're quite right. There's two updates there. The first one is that they've announced a proposed offering of ordinary shares, which are going to be used to fund the repurchase of convertible notes. Remember, they took out two convertible notes, one that's going to be running until 2029, and the second one was 2030. Now, the conversion prices on these notes are $13.64 and $16.81 respectively, which means that after a certain period of time, the company can, through cash or shares, convert these shares at those prices. Now, remember where the share price is today. Share price is north of $45. So they're using the opportunity now with a high share price. They're going to sell some shares and effectively arrange to deal with these bondholders. Now, at the same time, they've made a second announcement where they're going to issue more convertible notes that will run to 2032 and 2033 respectively. So that's another 2 billion, 1 billion for each year, and the potential to increase that by a further 300 million. And we've seen that those increases apply to literally all the convertible notes we've seen from many of the miners who've been processing these over the last sort of 3-4 months in light of getting these deals signed. And you can see that once a company has signed a deal with a hyperscaler, with a large client, then there is a requirement then for them to get their capital in place by a certain time period, so that enable them to be sufficient capital to deliver that contract over the sort of like foreseeable future. And this is what we've seen the likes of TeraWulf do that. We've seen the likes of Cipher do that, and now we're seeing IREn do it as well. Remember, they had a significant amount of cash on their latest earnings, which they only updated last month. And in terms of the balance sheet, we could see that they had just over a billion. I think it was $1.032 billion on the balance sheet as at that date there. This is going to now raise another 2.3 billion. And believe you me, they need that. Remember, Microsoft are going to give them 1.9 billion advance of the deal to help them fund some of those GPUs, because we know they have two elements to pay for, Bryce. They have the GPUs and they have the capital for the building.
Yeah, and you can see from their slides here, the GPUs alone expected to be $5.8 billion. Again, these are going to be the GB300, so brand new models. The other component, if you go back to actually their prior deck, you can see they're estimating the build cost for the actual facility in the neighborhood of about $15 to $16 million per megawatt. So this is a little bit higher than what we've seen. They do give a breakdown, and you can see they're actually paying about $2 million per megawatt as an acceleration to get this stuff online in time for Microsoft.
Absolutely. And if you use that sort of maybe the midpoint there, that 15 million per megawatt, and look at how much compute power they're going to deliver, which is 200 megawatts, that gives you a sense there that there's going to be, 3 billion required just in the capital cost for delivering those 4 Horizon buildings, Horizon 1 to 4. On top of that, you've already articulated just under 6 billion required for GPUs as well. That's a total of, getting on for 9 billion. Now, remember, when you're building these buildings, they're going to last probably a minimum of about 20 years, and they'll certainly be depreciated over a period of at least 20 years. The GPUs themselves, we'd probably depreciate over a period of about 5 years. So that's the length of the contract, 5 years. That $5.8 to $6 billion they're going to spend on GPUs, that will be obviously about 1.2 billion a year. And if you use the depreciation from the building that 3 billion over the 20 years, that'll give you about 150 million of depreciation associated there. So already you've got this total of about 1.35 billion each year in terms of depreciation costs for GPUs and for the building using the figures that they've highlighted. Now, the contract itself is about 1.9 billion of revenue each year. Remember, it's 9.5 billion over the 5 years. So you've then got to pay out your energy costs. You've then got to pay staffing costs and all the other SG&A costs and other operating bits and pieces that they're doing there. Remember, when we talk about the site there, even things like the water was being shipped in on a daily basis for these cooling centres to make sure there was sufficient water available. So tankers will be coming in. All these things add up, and so you can start building your costs out there. But this is the first deal. This only represents 10% of the power that IREn have, and I'm sure once they start, delivering this and having been to that site there, it looks likely that, Microsoft will probably take the whole site. I can't see another client going on to Childress if Microsoft have got 4 buildings there. I mean, we weren't allowed to take any photographs anywhere near inside those buildings. Nobody else is going to be allowed on there. So it's in my own mind and from my perspective, I think from your perspective as well, Bryce, I think that Microsoft will probably take all 10 buildings. So remember that in their presentation deck, they want to build out 10 horizons, which is the 500 megawatts of compute power, with the 250 giving a total of 750 megawatts. And that's the total amount of power available at Childress.
You're right. It'll be interesting to see where they put those Bitcoin mining machines. And I do agree. I feel like this is really a foot in the door, the first or start of this story or partnership we're going to hear with Microsoft. It is a difficult one to analyze because, yeah, this is kind of untested waters. We don't know the lifespan of these GPUs. The buildings themselves, we talked to the team, those are expected to have multi-decade life. But it will be interesting to see how these various different contracts stack up over the next 5, 10, 15 years. The one thing I will say in terms of today's news or yesterday's news from IREn, I really like the fact that they've pushed out these convertible note deadlines. They're taking advantage of the high share price now to purchase back in cash to maybe avoid some dilution. But as you mentioned in the intro, the market itself actually trading down on IREn today, I guess, in light of that dilution we just talked about. The final piece we wanted to touch on here, Anthony, hash rate index. Bitcoin price, we mentioned, has been on quite a tear here today. Hash price back up in the 38s. However, if we look at the forward hash curve, again, supporting exactly what you've said. Why are these miners moving to HPC? This is why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a challenging environment for mining at the moment there. We don't see any sort of when the hash price gets this low, and if we go back to 2022, 2021, 2022, when it was a challenging time when the Bitcoin price then, even during that period, miners were getting something like $400 a day per petahash. And when you look at the hash price today, it's down into the $30 range. Now, a lot's happened since then. Machines have got obviously more efficient. Miners have tried to get cheaper power. And you just can't keep, that's not just sustainable all the time there. To buy the most advanced fleets, and we just talked about those Auradine machines there, they're going to be expensive machines to buy. They will have took a lot of cost in terms of developing those machines, in terms of R&D. Many people working many hours to get to that to the level of what those machines are. We've seen that through Bitmain, we've seen that through Bitdeer as well. In terms of those costs coming through, certainly with Bitdeer, we've seen those costs coming through the income statement, and they're quite significant. You need a big team there. And Auradine had a reasonable sized team there. Now, to keep replacing mining machines is going to cost a lot of money. And the global hash rate is still nearly 1,100 exahash. It's been no sort of pullback on that really at all over the past few months, even though we've seen this decline from over $60 a day down to the $30. Now, today's Bitcoin price is giving a little bit of respite there. But believe you me, if we don't see any significant movement in the next sort of 4 weeks, the end of this quarter, the next set of numbers that come out from these mining companies in terms of the final quarter for 2025 are not going to be as rosy as some of the numbers that we just saw for Q3.
No, they're not. And as you see the global hash rate rising with the hash price dropping, I guess people either really don't care about the price of power, they've got access to cheap power, or they really value having that Bitcoin. One of the two, I guess time will tell. But an interesting dynamic. I definitely at the start of the year would have estimated global hash rate to drop in line with hash price, but things have changed. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, you guys, specifically how you're feeling about the IREn news today and your thoughts on ABTC and this pullback we've seen in the market. If you're still watching, hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.